So I might say, well, why are you going to university? Or I might say, what are you doing right now? And then the answer would be, well, I'm sitting in class. And then the question would be, well, why are you sitting in class? And the answer to that would be, well, because I want to take this course. And why? Well, it's because I want to get my degree. So why? Well, because I want to be prepared for a career and a productive and high quality life when I get out. Well, why? Well, you can keep saying why pretty much indefinitely. And as you answer, you go farther and farther out in time scales. Now, it's a tricky thing because one of the things I might tell you, this is a very complex cognitive problem, is, well, where should you stop? So, for example, I could say to you, do you want $100 an hour, or do you want 50,000 years in 75 years? You're going to think, well, I'll probably take $100 now. Well, how about 200 years? It's like, well, I'm not going to be there. I'll take the $100 now. Well, so obviously thinking out 200 years is not that helpful. Now, you might think, well, no, you should calculate the effects of your actions on the vastest time span possible and include the largest number of people if you're really going to equilibrate it. But the problem is you can't do the computations because you get this thing called combinatorial explosion happening, which is that it's like a chessboard. You make one move, okay, fine. But then you could make four, and then with each of those you could make four more, and then with each of those you could make four more. And soon, if you're looking 20 moves ahead, it's like there's so many moves that the other person could possibly make that looking that far ahead is pointless. You can't do the computations. And so we don't know how far you should look into the future. It depends on how stable your environment is. But 1 month seems okay. A year, yeah. 3 to 5 years, that's what I'll have you do when you do the future authoring program. 20 years? Probably not. And the reason for that is the margin of error in your prediction grows so large that your prediction isn't worth anything. And you can really see how that's the case now. Because, like, what's it going to be like in 20 years? When I was a kid, I used to read science fiction. It's like plausible accounts of the potential future. It's like, now? Who knows? Anything could happen. Anything could happen. You could be 3/4 robot in 20 years. You could have a lifespan of 10,000 years. I mean, we just do not know. We could be living in caves again with everything in ruins. We don't have a clue what's going to happen. So 20-year span, I would say, get friendly with computers. 20-year span's too long. So, okay, anyways, what I'm pointing out is that you have to calculate what you're doing across multiple spans of time, and in that combination, in combination with many, many people. And that makes things very complex, but that's how you're building the structures that you live within. One of the immediate objects of contemplation is the fact that human beings are limited, right? There's lots of things we can't do. For example, you're there and you're not there. Then that's thrownness from a phenomenological perspective. You're just stuck with what you are. You're a certain height, you have a certain eye color, you're a certain amount of attractive or not. You're verbally fluent, you're smart or you're not, or you're conscientious, and it's just sort of, those are the cards that you've been dealt. And it really is worth thinking about it that way, because who you are in some sense is a consequence of a lot of processes, genetic processes, that are in some ways random. And you've been dealt a particular hand, and then you have to play it. And that hand has limitations. And so people in some sense they're offered opportunities by the nature of how they're constituted. But there's also a tragic element to that, which is, well, as you move in life, you bump up against limitations that you cannot transcend. And those are the typical limitations. You bump up against the demands of the social group, which has a tyrannical element. You bump up against nature itself, because you're susceptible to illness and to degeneration and eventually to death, and so are the people around you. And so there's this issue at the bottom of being that also presents you with a problem. So life is problematic. You're trying to solve it, and that's what you're stuck with. So that's sort of the parameters of being. So I think in most mythological language, I like to think of mythology, philosophy, and then mythology as like forms of conceptualization that are examining the grammatical structure of being. It's like what's common among sets of people, what's common to the experience of sets of people. And the fact that you are is one of them, and the fact that you are has problems is another. And then a third one is, well, you're motivated at least to some degree to do something about those things. And so that's what makes people human in many regards. It's something fundamental that makes them human. So you can think about that as tragic self-consciousness. It's self-conscious because you know who you are, and it's tragic because you also know where your limitations are, and they're fundamental. And that also sets up another set of motivations, which is, well, is there something we can do about this? Can we limit our vulnerability? Can we extend our scope of power? And how do we do that without causing more trouble than we're solving? So with that kind of common problem at the basis of our being, that's also what enables us to communicate, because we understand each other, because we're in the same states of being. So you can talk to someone about your problems without having to explain what problems are, because you can't communicate with people unless there's some things you don't have to communicate about. You need a shared set of assumptions. And one of them is, for example, that you have problems. Another is that maybe you're looking for solutions. Another is that maybe communication about that is helpful. You know, none of those things have to be established before you start communicating, because everyone's already got that, those presuppositions built right into their understanding. Wherever you are, you have some conception of where you are. That's your current understanding of the world. It's flawed. Just because you're here doesn't mean you understand everything about being here, hopefully, because you have low resolution conceptions. You don't know anything about the people around you. As long as they sit down and shut up and act normally, that's no problem, because you could easily ignore them. But they're full of weird potential, and God only knows when that's going to emerge from one of them. But so I'm saying, you know where you are, you have a model of what you are, but it's shallow and potentially flawed. And part of the reason that you can get away with that is because there's this implicit agreement among all of us not to do anything that violates general social expectation. And so that's partly how you can get away with the fact that you don't know anything about anyone. It's like, yeah, they're peculiar, like rhinoceroses and ostriches, and God only knows what they're up to. But hopefully they're socialized enough so they don't show you how peculiar they are when you're walking past them on the street in public. And so you can get away with your shallow knowledge. So, and then you have some sense of where you're going. And you know, maybe that's vague. Part of it, it's going to be there whether you have thought it through or not. And the reason for that is, as we've discussed, the biologists are pretty good at informing us on this part, is that, you know, at the base of your cognitive, emotional, motivational, perceptual structure that gives rise to your being are these systems that are going to push you in some direction, as a motivation systems or emotion systems. So if you don't drink water long enough, pretty much that's all you're going to be able to think about and value. And not only that, see the world through. Because when you see the world as a thirsty person, you're not seeing the world the same way that someone who has had plenty to drink sees it. So, you know, so you have this space that defines where you are, and this conception about where you're going, and you think where you're going is better, and you have a theory about how you're going to transform the present into the more desirable future. But you can make an error at any level of that conceptualization.